A lonely rancher adopted a poor Apache girl. She turned out to be the daughter of a runaway widow. The sun had barely begun to rise over the endless plains when John Carter rode out from his small cabin. The sky was a soft pale orange, and the wind carried the faint smell of dry grass and earth. John was a man of habit. Every morning he checked on the cattle, mended fences, and made sure the water troughs were full. His life was simple, repetitive, and, he often admitted to himself, lonely. The ranch had been in his family for generations, but he had no close relatives left. Friends were few, and neighbors even fewer. Most of the people in town knew him as quiet, steady, and a little distant. He didn't mind. He... Raven's breaths rasp through the fluids. He glances around in desk so intensely. Yet, deep down he felt a hollow ache he could not shake. It was on one of these early morning rides that he first saw her. She was crouched near the edge of the property, shivering, with her thin arms wrapped around her knees. At first, John thought she might be a lost traveler, or perhaps a child from the nearby town wandering too far. But as he got closer, he saw the state she was in. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and her bare feet were red and cracked from the cold and the rough ground. Her dark hair fell in tangled strands over her face, and her eyes, large, alert, and wary, looked at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. John had never been good with children. He had no experience raising anyone, and the thought of taking responsibility for a child seemed daunting. And yet, something about her struck a chord deep inside him. There was a quiet strength in her gaze, a determination that seemed beyond her years. Bella, he dismounted slowly, careful not to startle her, and spoke in a low, gentle voice. "Hey there, are you lost?" he asked. The girl flinched but didn't run. She shook her head slightly, but the fear in her eyes did not fade. John noticed she was shivering violently, and despite his usual reserve, he felt a surge of compassion.
He removed his thick coat and held it out to her.
"Take this," he said. "You're freezing." Then, slowly, she took the coat, wrapping it around herself as best she could. John's eyes softened as he studied her. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, and yet there was something in her posture, a mix of pride and wariness, that suggested she had learned to survive on her own. "Where are your folks?" John asked, unsure why he even cared. The girl shook her head again, staying silent. He sighed. He didn't usually involve himself in other people's problems, but something about her made him feel responsible. Without thinking much about it, he said, "Come on. You can ride with me back to the cabin. We'll get you some food and something warm to drink." She hesitated for only a moment before following him. She climbed onto the saddle behind him, gripping tightly. John rode slowly, aware that she seemed tense and alert, as if she were prepared to flee at any moment. The ride to the cabin was quiet. The girl didn't speak, and John didn't press her. Words weren't needed. Sometimes just presence was enough. When they reached the cabin, John led her inside and set a chair by the small stove. He quickly filled a bowl with warm milk and bread and watched as she ate with quiet intensity, almost as if she hadn't had a proper meal in days. He felt a mixture of sadness and admiration. She was so small, yet her spirit was strong. After she finished eating, John made her a small bed in the corner of the main room. It wasn't much, a thin mattress on the floor with a blanket. But it would be warm and safe for the night. She hesitated before lying down, and John sensed the weight of her past experiences pressing down on her. "What's your name?" he asked finally, trying to keep his voice gentle. The girl looked at him, her dark eyes measuring him. Then, softly, she whispered, "Little Sky."
John nodded. It was an unusual name, but it suited her.
There was something airy and free about it, yet also quiet and serious, just like her.
You're safe here, John said.
No one's going to hurt you. Little Sky didn't reply. She simply curled up on the blanket, hugging herself. John watched her for a moment, then turned away to tend to the fire. He felt a strange, new sense of purpose. He had spent years living alone, thinking he didn't need anyone. But now, watching this small, frightened girl sleep, he realized he could not imagine letting her go back to the dangers of the outside world. Days turned into weeks, and Little Sky slowly began to adjust to life on the ranch. She helped with small chores, feeding chickens, carrying water, gathering eggs, and in return John taught her to read and write. She was a quick learner, and John found himself surprised at how sharp and intelligent she was. In quiet moments, she would ask questions about the stars, the land, and the animals. John answered as best he could, feeling a bond grow between them. Despite her trust in him, Little Sky's past remained a mystery. John noticed a small, faded locket she always wore around her neck. It was old and scratched, and the tiny picture inside was hard to make out. He asked her about it once, and she grew quiet, clutching it tightly. He didn't push. Some things, he realized, could not be forced. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of pink and gold, Little Sky sat on the porch steps, gazing out at the horizon. Bob handing her a cup of warm milk. She sipped it silently, her eyes still fixed on the distant hills. "Do you miss anyone?" John asked softly. Little Sky hesitated, then shook her head. I don't know," she admitted. "I remember someone, but I don't know where they are." Her voice was small, fragile, but there was a quiet strength in it. John nodded, understanding more than she could know. Sometimes it's okay not to know. You're here now, and that's what matters. That night, John lay awake in his bed, listening to the soft breathing of the girl in the corner. He thought about how much his life had changed in just a few short days. The ranch no longer felt empty. There was now laughter, curiosity, and the quiet presence of someone who depended on him. He had spent so many years alone, believing that solitude was all he needed. But Little Sky had brought something into his life that he could not have anticipated: hope, purpose, and a sense of belonging. The next morning, John awoke to the sound of soft singing. He peeked out of his bedroom door and saw Little Sky in the kitchen, her small hands moving deftly as she helped prepare breakfast. Her voice was soft but clear, singing a tune she had clearly made up herself. John smiled quietly, feeling a warmth spread through him. It was during this time that he began to notice small things about her. How she would look up at the sky and smile, how she carefully tended to every animal on the ranch, how she would quietly observe the world around her with a thoughtful, almost serious expression. She was no ordinary child. She had survived hardships he could not even imagine, and yet she carried herself with a grace and courage that made him proud. One afternoon, while cleaning her small bundle of belongings, John noticed the locket again. He picked it up gently, examining the tiny photograph. It was a faded picture of a woman holding a baby. The initials engraved inside were nearly worn away. Paz. "Who is this?" John asked softly. Little Sky's eyes filled with tears. She clutched the locket to her chest and shook her head. I don't know," she whispered. I just want to stay here." He didn't press further. Some mysteries, he realized, would reveal themselves in time. For now, the important thing was that she was safe, that she had a home, and that she had someone who cared for her. As the days passed, the bond between John and Little Sky deepened. She began to trust him more, laughing softly at his rare jokes, asking questions about the land, and slowly revealing glimpses of her past. John, in turn, found himself opening up in ways he had never imagined. The quiet ranch that had once been his refuge of solitude was now filled with the soft sounds of life, curiosity, and the fragile beginnings of family. And yet the locket remained, a small reminder that Little Sky's past was still out there, waiting to be discovered. John didn't know what that past held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would protect her, no matter what. She had come into his life like a sudden gust of wind, changing everything in its path. And for the first time in years, John felt truly alive. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm that was both new and comforting for Little Sky. Each morning she woke with the sun, the soft golden light spilling across the wooden floors of the small cabin. John was already up before her, tending to the cattle or checking fences. At first, she had been hesitant to follow him into the cold, open air, but over time she learned the ways of the land. The people's desks stale at other heads. John watched her carefully, noting how she approached every chore with a mixture of curiosity and determination. She was small, but she had a surprising strength. It was in the way she lifted buckets, in the way she reached for the highest eggs without complaint, and in the careful attention she gave to every animal on the ranch. John had never seen anyone so young carry themselves with such quiet confidence. Yet, for all her skill, there was still a shadow in her eyes, a lingering fear of a world that had not been kind to her. Despite his gruff and reserved nature, John began to teach her small lessons in reading and writing. He had never considered himself a teacher, but he found a strange pleasure in seeing her mind open to new knowledge.
Little Sky was an eager student.
She loved the letters, the words, and the way stories could transport her to places she had never been. John watched her progress with a sense of pride he had never known. "You're getting better every day," he told her one afternoon as she carefully copied a passage from an old book onto a piece of parchment. Little Sky looked up at him, a small smile on her face.
"I like learning," she admitted quietly. "I want to know everything."
"Patience, Little Sky. There's plenty of time for everything." But life on the ranch was not just about work and learning. There were moments of quiet joy, too. Little Sky discovered the beauty of the world around her. The way the wind rustled through the tall grass, the smell of wildflowers in spring, and the sound of birds singing at dawn. John began to notice her fascination with the sky, the stars, and the distant hills. Sometimes she would sit for hours, simply watching, lost in thought. Yet even as she adapted to her new life, whispers of her past lingered.
Little Sky occasionally spoke of her mother, a woman who had disappeared long ago, leaving her alone in a harsh world.
She never spoke in detail, but John could see the pain in her eyes, the longing for someone she had lost. He never pushed her to speak. He knew that some memories were too fragile to force into the open. The townspeople were aware of Little Sky's presence on the ranch, and not all of them were kind. Some whispered behind their hands, questioning why a man like John would take in an Apache girl. Others were curious, asking questions that John brushed off with a polite but firm refusal to answer. He had always been private, and he was not about to change that now. The ranch was their home, and he would protect it, and her, from anyone who sought to cause harm. Despite the quiet tension in town, life on the ranch grew warmer and fuller. Little Sky began to feel a sense of belonging she had never known before. She laughed more easily, helped John with his work without complaint, and even began to take small risks, like venturing further into the fields or attempting to ride one of the younger horses under John's careful supervision. Each new experience brought with it a mixture of excitement and fear, but John was always there to guide her, to steady her when she faltered, and to encourage her when she succeeded. One afternoon, while John was repairing a broken fence near the edge of the property, Little Sky wandered into the garden. tending to the small vegetables and herbs that had started to flourish under her care. Desperate questions. She noticed a patch of wildflowers growing near the fence line and carefully picked a few, arranging them in a small jar she kept on the kitchen windowsill. When John returned, tired but satisfied with his work, he noticed the flowers and smiled quietly. "You've got a good eye," he said. "Makes the place feel alive." Little Sky looked up at him, her eyes shining.
I like it here,
She said softly.
I feel safe.
John nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He had always thought of himself as a solitary man, one who did not need anyone. But now, seeing the trust and warmth in the girl's eyes, he realized how wrong he had been. She had brought life to his quiet world, and he could not imagine letting her go. Even as she grew more comfortable, the locket she always wore remained a small mystery.
John had tried to ask about it, but Little Sky would only grow quiet and clutch it tightly to her chest.
He understood. Some things were private, and he would respect that.
Yet he could not help but wonder about her past, the family she had lost, and the journey that had brought her to his doorstep. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with shades of pink and gold, Little Sky and John sat on the porch, sharing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and milk. The air was cool, carrying the scent of earth and grass, and the distant call of a bird echoed across the plains. "Do you ever think about your mother?" John asked quietly, breaking the comfortable silence.
Little Sky hesitated, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes," she admitted.
"I remember bits, but it's like trying to hold water in your hands." Desperation. It slips away.
John nodded, understanding more than she could know.
It's hard to remember the past sometimes, but what matters is here and now. Little Sky leaned back, feeling the warmth of the fire and the presence of someone who truly cared for her. For the first time in her life, she felt the quiet certainty of safety. The ranch, the land, and John had become more than just a temporary shelter. They were a home. Weeks passed and their bond deepened. Little Sky began to share small details about her life before the ranch, stories of wandering, hunger, and nights spent under the stars alone. She spoke of her mother, of a woman who had faced hardships with courage, who had made choices to survive even when it meant leaving her behind. John listened, never interrupting, offering comfort in quiet words and simple gestures. One morning, as Little Sky was arranging her small belongings, John noticed the locket once more. It was worn and scratched, but he could see a faint picture inside, a woman holding a baby, her eyes kind and protective. "Who is this?" John asked gently. Little Sky's eyes filled with tears. She clutched the locket tightly to her chest and shook her head.
"I don't know," she whispered.
"I only know I want to stay here." John nodded, understanding that the past was still a delicate thing, and some truths could only be revealed in time. For now, the important thing was that she was safe, that she had a home, and that someone cared for her. Days on the ranch continued, filled with work, learning, and quiet moments of connection. Little Sky began to trust John completely, laughing at his rare jokes, asking questions about the world, and slowly revealing glimpses of her thoughts and feelings. John, in turn, found himself opening up, sharing small stories of his own childhood, the history of the ranch, and the routines that had once seemed so lonely but now felt meaningful because of her presence. Yet even as life grew warmer and more comfortable, the locket remained a small reminder of a past waiting to be discovered.
John did not know what it held, but he knew one thing for certain: he would protect Little Sky, no matter what.
She had come into his life like a sudden gust of wind, changing everything. And for the first time in many years, John felt truly alive, not just surviving, but living, As the sun set on another day, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, little Sky lay in her small bed, thinking of the land, the animals, and the man who had saved her. She clutched her locket and whispered a small prayer, hoping that someday she would understand her past. But for now, she felt a quiet happiness she had never known. Desk. She was no longer alone. She was home. Spring had settled over the ranch, painting the plains with soft greens and wildflowers. The mornings were warmer now, and the sunlight spilled over the hills in golden waves. Little Sky had grown more confident in her routines, learning to ride a horse with steady balance, and helping John with tasks that had once seemed too difficult. Life on the ranch felt safe, steady, and familiar. A quiet world where she could breathe freely and trust the kindness of someone who had saved her. But as peaceful as the days had become, shadows from the past began to creep into their lives. One late afternoon, as John and Little Sky were mending fences near the edge of the property, the sound of hooves in the distance reached their ears.
At first, John thought it might be a traveler passing by, but the rider did not wave or slow down.
Instead, the figure came closer with a purpose, riding directly toward the ranch. There was a seriousness in the way the rider sat in the saddle that made John uneasy. As the rider approached, Little Sky instinctively hid behind John. The stranger was a woman, well-dressed for travel, with eyes sharp and searching. She dismounted quickly, tying her horse to the fence post, and looked directly at Little Sky.
"Excuse me," she said, her voice both firm and gentle.
I am looking for a young girl. Have you seen her? Little Sky's heart skipped a beat. She felt a cold knot of fear tighten in her chest. She had never seen this woman before. Yet something in the way she spoke made Little Sky feel as if the world she had known so far was about to shift. John stepped forward, his expression cautious. "Who is the girl you're looking for?" he asked. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small sketch of a young girl. Little Sky froze when she saw it. The picture was rough, drawn in black and white, but it was unmistakably her. The woman's eyes softened slightly as she noticed Little Sky's hesitation. "Is this your daughter?" the woman asked, hope and worry blending in her voice. Little Sky felt tears welling in her eyes. She didn't know what to say. This was the first real evidence she had that someone in the world knew who she was, yet the thought of leaving the only home she had ever known filled her with dread. John's jaw tightened as he watched the exchange. Psst. He understood quickly. This woman was claiming to be her mother. But he also knew how fragile Little Sky had become. She had survived alone, trusted him, and found safety on the ranch. The idea of taking her away now seemed cruel. "Desk? I'm not sure," Little Sky stammered, her small hands clutching the locket she always wore. "I don't know her. I don't know anything." The woman stepped closer, kneeling down to Little Sky's level. "My name is Eleanor Graves," she said gently. "I am your mother." "I have been searching for you for many years. I had to leave because of difficult circumstances. I never stopped hoping I would find you." Little Sky's mind raced. She had always wondered about her mother, about the family she had lost, but she had never expected a moment like this. Her thoughts turned to John, the man who had saved her, given her food, shelter, and a sense of safety she had never known before. The bond they shared was strong and unspoken, built on days of trust, care, and understanding. I don't know what to do," Little Sky whispered. Her voice trembled as she hid behind John instinctively. John placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Take your time," he said. "We'll figure this out together." Eleanor nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I just want you to know the truth," she said softly. I had to leave because I couldn't provide for you. I begged.
I made mistakes, and I ran away to survive, but I never stopped loving you.
Deskei. Little Sky looked down at the ground, tears spilling from her eyes. She felt torn between two worlds, the ranch, where she had found safety and love, and the mother she had never truly known, who now stood before her with stories of survival, regret, and hope. Her heart ached with confusion, longing, and fear. Over the next few days, the tension on the ranch grew. Little Sky would often wander into the fields alone, staring at the horizon as if searching for answers. John gave her space but remained close, quietly supporting her as she tried to process the arrival of Eleanor. He noticed how she flinched at sudden noises, how her hands clutched the locket tightly, and how her eyes sometimes held a distant sadness, as though part of her was lost in a world she had not yet understood. Eleanor tried to connect with her, telling stories of her own struggles, of the hardship she had faced as a widow trying to survive alone, and of the love she had always carried for the child she had been forced to leave behind. At first, Little Sky listened quietly, hesitant to believe anything. She wanted to trust Eleanor, but the bond she had formed with John was too strong to ignore. One afternoon, Eleanor invited Little Sky to walk with her into the nearby woods. They walked in silence at first, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot filling the air. Eleanor stopped by a small clearing and pointed to a distant hill. I used to come here with your father before everything changed, she said softly.
I remember dreaming of a life where we could be together, safe and free. I wanted you to have that too.
Little Sky listened, her mind swirling with emotions she could not name. She wanted to feel the warmth of her mother's love, but she also feared leaving the only home she had ever known. John had been there for her when no one else was, had given her comfort, protection, and guidance. The thought of leaving him made her chest ache.
As the days passed, Little Sky began to sneak out quietly to meet Eleanor in town.
She would walk with her mother along the dusty streets, learning bits and pieces about the life she had been born into.
Eleanor shared stories of hardship, of running from danger, of the choices she had made to survive.
Little Sky listened, fascinated and saddened by the tales of struggle and loss. Yet, each time she returned to the ranch, she felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. The bond with John was undeniable. He had given her a home, love, and the sense of belonging she had never known before. Eleanor had given her answers, but the connection with her mother was still fragile and new.
One evening, a storm rolled in over the plains.
Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning lit up the sky in jagged streaks. Little Sky was alone in the barn, tending to the animals as the wind howled around the wooden structure. Suddenly, a frightened horse bolted, kicking at the stalls. Little Sky tried to calm it, but the storm's fury seemed overwhelming. John arrived just in time, steadying the horse and pulling Little Sky close. "It's okay," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "I've got you." Little Sky clung to him, feeling the safety of his presence. She realized in that moment how deeply she depended on him, not just for survival, but for comfort, guidance, and love. Eleanor had given her answers about her past, but John had given her a life, stability, and a sense of belonging. That night, as the storm raged outside, Little Sky lay in her small bed, clutching her locket and thinking about everything that had happened. She had a mother, a woman who had searched for her across miles and years, and yet she also had John, who had been her protector, teacher, and friend. The weight of the choice she would soon have to make pressed heavily on her small shoulders. John knocked gently on her door. "Are you awake?" he asked.
Little Sky nodded. He sat down beside her bed, his presence steady and calm.
"I know this is hard," he said softly. "I can't tell you what to do."
But I want you to know something. You are not alone. Whatever choice you make, I will respect it.
I only want what's best for you. Little Sky looked up at him, tears in her eyes. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I don't know who I belong to anymore.
You belong where you feel safe and loved. You'll know when the time comes.
For now, just live in the moment. Little Sky nodded, feeling the weight of his words sink into her heart. She had survived alone for so long, and now she had two worlds stretching before her, one filled with the love of a mother she barely knew, and one filled with the safety and guidance of a man who had saved her. The days turned into weeks, and the tension between the past and present continued to build.
Little Sky learned more about her mother's life, the sacrifices she had made and the reasons she had been forced to leave.
Each story brought her closer to understanding where she had come from, but also made her realize how deeply she had grown attached to the life she had built with John. In quiet moments, she would sit on the porch with John, watching the sunset and feeling the comfort of his presence. She began to understand that love could be complicated, that family could mean different things, and that sometimes the heart must make difficult choices. And yet, the locket around her neck remained a reminder of the mystery still unfolding, the connection to her mother, the life she had lost, and the choices she would soon have to make. Little Sky knew that soon she could no longer hide from the truth. She would have to confront her past, face her fears, and decide where her heart truly belonged. The summer sun had grown hotter, beating down on the plains with a relentless warmth. The ranch, once quiet and peaceful, now held a tension that was hard to ignore. Little Sky's heart felt heavy. Every day brought new questions, new emotions, and the looming decision she knew she had to face. She had come to understand her mother, Eleanor, a woman who had faced unimaginable hardships and had been searching for her all this time. And yet she had also come to rely on John, the quiet, steady man who had rescued her, nurtured her, and made her feel safe in a world that had once seemed so cruel. Little Sky spent her mornings working with the animals, trying to keep herself busy, but her mind often wandered. She would pause in the middle of chores, staring at the horizon, wondering what her mother's life had truly been like, what dangers she had faced, and whether she could ever belong in that world. She wanted to trust Eleanor, to step into the past she had never known, but a part of her was afraid. Leaving John, leaving the ranch that had become her home, felt impossible. One afternoon, Eleanor invited Little Sky to accompany her into town once again. They walked together along the dusty path, the sun warm on their backs. Eleanor spoke softly, telling stories of the years she had lived without her daughter, of the nights she had spent worrying and searching, and of the sacrifices she had made to survive.
Little Sky listened, her heart torn between admiration for her mother's strength and fear of losing the only home she had ever known.
I want you to understand why I had to leave, Eleanor said, stopping to look at Little Sky with gentle eyes.
I had no choice. I only wanted to keep you safe. I never stopped loving you. Little Sky swallowed hard, her throat tight. I know, she whispered. I can see that now.
But I don't know what to do.
Eleanor reached out, taking her hands in hers. You don't have to decide today. Take your time. I only want you to feel safe and loved, no matter what you choose. The walk back to the ranch was quiet. Little Sky felt a swirl of emotions: love, confusion, fear, and longing. She knew that soon a choice would have to be made. But she was not ready. She still needed time to understand herself, her feelings, and the bond she had formed with both Eleanor and John. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with brilliant oranges and purples, Little Sky returned to the ranch. She found John in the barn, mending a fence. His expression was calm but attentive, as if he could sense the storm of emotions raging inside her. "How was it?" he asked quietly, not pressing, simply wanting to know.
It was good," Little Sky said softly. "She tells me things about her life, about hers and mine."
John nodded, understanding. He had noticed the change in her, the way she sometimes drifted into thought, the way her hands would clutch the locket tighter, the way she occasionally flinched at shadows or noises. He knew the past was catching up with her, and he knew he could not shield her forever. Days passed, and the tension on the ranch grew. Little Sky found herself torn between two worlds. She wanted to trust her mother, to step into the life she had been born into, but the thought of leaving John made her chest ache. The ranch had become her sanctuary. The animals, the fields, and John's steady presence had given her a sense of belonging she had never felt before. One dry afternoon, disaster struck. A fire broke out on the ranch, likely sparked by the hot sun and dry grass near the edge of the fields. Smoke rose quickly, and flames began to spread toward the barns and stables. Little Sky was in the barn when the fire started, tending to the animals as she did every day. The horses were frightened, kicking at the stalls and pulling at their ropes. Little Sky's heart pounded. She tried to calm them, but the fire's heat and the smoke made it difficult to breathe, and panic began to set in. John arrived just in time, shouting instructions over the roar of the flames. Together, he and Little Sky worked to lead the animals out of the barn. Eleanor, who had been visiting the ranch that day, saw the fire and rushed to help. She quickly joined them, carrying buckets of water and helping guide the frightened horses to safety. The three of them worked tirelessly, sweat and soot covering their faces, until the fire was finally under control. The barns were scorched and some supplies were lost, but the animals were safe. Little Sky collapsed onto the ground, coughing from the smoke but filled with relief. John knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "You did well," he said quietly. "You stayed calm. You helped them." Little Sky looked at him, her chest heaving. Bowed. She realized in that moment how deeply she relied on him, not just for guidance, but for courage, for stability, for love.
Eleanor stood nearby, her eyes filled with admiration and concern.
She had seen the bond between Little Sky and John, and she understood that it would not be easy for the girl to choose between the two worlds now before her. In the quiet that followed the fire, Little Sky retreated to her small room, clutching her locket and thinking about everything that had happened. The fire had reminded her of something important, that life could be unpredictable, that danger could come at any time, and that she could not hide from the truth forever. She had to make a choice, but how could she decide where her heart truly belonged? The next morning, Little Sky sat on the porch, staring at the horizon. The wind carried the faint smell of smoke and burnt grass from the fire, a reminder of the danger they had faced. Eleanor approached slowly, sitting beside her.
"You're thinking about the choice," Eleanor said softly. Little Sky nodded, tears forming in her eyes.
"I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I love you, but I
love him too. I don't know how to choose."
Desks.
Eleanor took her hands in hers. It's not about choosing who you love.
It's about finding where you feel safe, where you feel at home. That is your decision to make, and it must come from your heart. Little Sky leaned against her mother, feeling the warmth and comfort of the woman she had been searching for all her life. Yet she also thought of John, the man who had saved her, protected her, and shown her what a family could be. She felt torn, as if her heart were being pulled in two directions at once. Over the next few days, Little Sky began to spend more time alone, walking the fields and tending to the animals. She reflected on everything she had learned about her past, about her mother's struggles, and about the love and care John had given her. She realized that she had grown stronger, braver, and more independent because of the experiences she had lived through. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, John came to her quietly. "Have you thought about it?" he asked gently. Little Sky shook her head. I need more time," she whispered. "I can't rush this. I need to understand what my heart wants." John nodded, his expression softening. "Take all the time you need. I only want you to be happy. That's all that matters." The following week, Eleanor came to visit again. She brought with her stories of the past, of the struggles she had faced as a widow, and of the reasons she had been forced to leave her daughter. Little Sky listened, fascinated and moved by the tales. She saw her mother not as someone trying to take her away, but as a woman who had fought to survive and who had always loved her. At the same time, she could not ignore the bond with John, the life they had built together on the ranch, and the safety and love he had provided. The decision she faced was not easy, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized that her heart was being pulled in two directions. One night, as a gentle breeze rustled the leaves outside, Little Sky sat with the locket in her hands.
She whispered to herself, "I have to be brave. I have to choose. But I want to make the right choice for me."
She felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but she also felt a growing sense of clarity. She knew that she would have to face her fears, confront her emotions, and make a choice that came from the heart, not from obligation or fear. And so, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Little Sky resolved that the coming days would bring clarity. She would confront her past, acknowledge the love of her mother, and decide where her heart truly belonged. The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing for certain. She had grown stronger, wiser, and braver than she had ever been before. She was ready to face the choice, and whatever the outcome, she would do so with courage and honesty. The morning air was crisp and quiet over the ranch. Little Sky woke earlier than usual, feeling a sense of determination she had never experienced before. The night had been long, filled with thoughts, memories, and quiet reflection. She had spent hours turning over her feelings in her mind, thinking about her mother, Eleanor, and about John, the man who had given her a home, protection, and love. She knew that today would be the day she could no longer delay the choice she had been avoiding. After tending to the animals and completing the morning chores, she sat on the porch, the locket heavy in her hands. She opened it carefully, tracing the tiny, faded photograph of the woman holding a baby. Her mind wandered back to the stories Eleanor had shared, the struggles, the escapes, the hardships of survival, and the love that had endured despite years of separation. She felt a deep sense of admiration and compassion for her mother. Yet, at the same time, her heart ached when she thought of John. He had been her guide, her protector, her friend, and, in ways she did not fully understand, a father figure. He had given her a life she could rely on, where each day brought stability, learning, and safety. Leaving him felt impossible, like tearing a part of herself away. Little Sky finally stood, clutching the locket tightly, and walked toward the barn where John was checking the horses. She could hear the gentle nickering of the animals and the soft rustle of hay. John looked up when he saw her approaching, his expression calm but curious. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. John set down the tools he had been using and wiped his hands on a cloth. "Of course." "Whatever it is, I'm here to listen." Little Sky took a deep breath and began to speak. She told him about her thoughts, the confusion she felt, and the fear of making the wrong choice. She spoke about Eleanor, about the mother she had never truly known, and about the love and guidance she had received from John. Tears formed in her eyes, but she did not stop. Distort. I don't know who I belong to, she admitted. I love my mother, and I want to be part of her life. But I love you. You saved me, and you gave me a home. You made me feel safe and cared for. I don't want to lose that. John listened quietly, his eyes softening with understanding. He could see the truth in her words, the struggle between past and present, the pull of family and home, and the depth of her heart. He reached out and gently took her hand. Little Sky, he said, his voice firm but gentle. You don't have to choose out of fear or obligation. You choose where your heart feels strongest. Wherever you feel safe, loved, and able to grow, that is where you belong. And whatever choice you make, I will respect it.
I want you to be happy more than anything else.
Little Sky nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She knew that John's words were true. He was not demanding, not controlling. He was giving her the freedom to choose her path. That freedom, though daunting, gave her strength. Later that day, Eleanor arrived at the ranch, her eyes hopeful and gentle. She saw the determination in Little Sky's posture and smiled softly, sensing that the girl was ready to speak. They walked together to the edge of the fields, where the sun reflected off the tall grass in golden waves. I've waited so long for this moment, Eleanor said quietly.
I only hope you can forgive me for the years we lost. Little Sky looked at her mother, her eyes filled with emotion.
She reached out and took Eleanor's hands in hers.
I forgive you,
she said softly. And I want to know you. I want to be part of your life. But I also need to stay here, with John. He gave me a home, and he showed me what it feels like to be safe and loved. Eleanor nodded, tears forming in her eyes. She understood now that love was not about possession or control. It was about care, freedom, and respect. Then we will find a way, she said gently. Both. You can have both. You can belong to both worlds. I will visit, and we will share stories. I want to be part of your life, but I will not take you from the life you have built. Relief and joy surged through Little Sky. She felt as if a great weight had been lifted from her chest. She could honor her mother's past while embracing the home and family she had found with John. She realized that love was not limited. It could be shared, experienced in different forms, and still be whole. That evening, after the chores were done and the animals were fed, Little Sky sat with John on the porch, painted in hues of purple and gold, and the air was warm with the calm of summer. She held out the locket, opening it carefully. This belonged to you, didn't it? She asked softly. John nodded, a small smile on his face. Desk. It did, he said. I found it when you first came to me. I didn't want to pry. I wanted you to keep it, to hold on to your past while building your future. Pure sway.
Little Sky touched the tiny photograph, feeling the connection to her mother and the journey she had survived. I understand now, she whispered.
I carry my past with me, but I also carry the life you gave me. I don't have to choose between them. I can have both. John smiled, his eyes shining with pride and affection. Exactly, he said. You're stronger than you know. And no matter what, this is your home. You're safe here. The days that followed were filled with warmth, laughter, and a growing sense of family. Eleanor visited often, sharing stories of her past, teaching Little Sky about the life she had endured, and helping her understand the woman she had come from. Little Sky found a balance, learning to embrace both her mother's world and the home she had built with John. She no longer felt torn, she felt complete. John and Little Sky worked together on the ranch, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and cultivating the land. Bella. Eleanor would join them occasionally, helping in the fields, sharing meals, and telling stories by the fire. The ranch, once quiet and lonely, was now alive with love, laughter, and the shared experiences of family. One evening, as the sun set and the sky glowed with golden light, Little Sky opened the locket once more. Inside was a small note from her mother, carefully written long ago. "Live bravely, my daughter. Love fully." She smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. She had survived hardship, found love, and built a life that honored both her past and her present. Little Sky stood on the porch, looking out at the plains that stretched endlessly before her. She felt the wind on her face, carrying the scents of grass, earth, and wildflowers. She thought of her mother, of John, of the animals and land that had become her home. She realized that life was not always easy, but it was beautiful, and love could be found in the most unexpected places. As night fell, stars twinkling in the clear sky, Little Sky felt a quiet certainty in her heart. She had made her choice, not by rejecting anyone, but by embracing the love, guidance, and safety she had been given. She understood that family was not always about blood, but about the care, protection, and support people offered to one another. John joined her on the porch, his presence steady and comforting. Eleanor arrived shortly after, carrying a small basket of food and a gentle smile. The three of them sat together, sharing a simple meal under the stars, feeling the quiet joy of connection and belonging.
Little Sky felt whole for the first time in her life.
She had faced the uncertainty of her past, confronted the fear of loss, and chosen a path that honored both her mother and the man who had saved her. She realized that life could be difficult, but it could also be full of love, hope, and the promise of new beginnings. In that moment, as the night wrapped around the ranch and the stars shone brightly above, Little Sky understood something important. That love, courage, and family were not always simple, but they were worth everything. She had found her place in the world, and she knew she would continue to grow, to learn, and to live fully, carrying the strength of her past and the warmth of her present wherever she went. The ranch, once a place of solitude and quiet, was now a home full of life, laughter, and hope. Little Sky had survived, she had chosen, and she had found her place in the hearts of those who loved her. And for the first time, she felt truly, deeply at peace.